everyone. Woo! So first, happy International Women's Day. Can we have a massive cheer for all the women in the room and on the video? Woo! So thank you guys so much for being here. And I want to start out with some moments of gratitude, because this book, Plus Wonder, has been a true collective and collaborative effort. And I first just want to say thanks to the 60 partnerships in the book. Some of whom you'll see in the room. I don't know where Chris and Beverly are. You're going to hear from, wave your hands back there. And some of you are going to hear from in a little bit. And also just a massive thanks to the Plus Wonder board, who have just been extraordinary. And also just a special thanks to, where's Sarah Grace? Sarah in the room somewhere. Sarah Grace, also to Lori Flynn. Lisa Valiant, you're somewhere, who's just been extraordinary. And also Ian and the No Format team. Check out the incredible website that they've built, which is just extraordinary. And also to BetaWorks, this venue we're in right now. They have given us for the night. So a massive thanks to BetaWorks. Woohoo! And then just want to say a big thanks to Sean and his team, Mike, Alice, and Lisa for helping bring us all together tonight. And I want to kick off also just by saying a massive thanks to my husband, Chris Waddell, who's going to be joining us tonight. And I wouldn't be standing here without him if it wasn't for his unconditional love, his patience, and his belief in me. So I'm so deeply thankful to him. So massive, well, when he comes in, we'll have to give him a big round of applause and embarrass him. And again, thanks to all of you in this room over the years have just been extraordinary on this project. So what I really want to kick off to before we get into the program is I just want to stand in solidarity right now with the people of Ukraine, especially for the women and children who are having to flee over the border right now. And I also want to stand in solidarity for the other people around the world who are also suffering from war and from poverty, whether that's in Syria, whether that's Afghanistan, Yemen, Ethiopia, and right in our backyard in America. And you know, the world right now is so divided and so fearful. And I really believe that we're in this position of fear and division because we've pushed ourselves into becoming so hyper-individualistic. And we have a real moment right now to change that. And the fear and the risk is that if anyone saw the IPCC report last week, it was quite shocking. And I have a quote from one of the co-authors, Hans Otto Portner, who said, "Any further delay in concerted global action will miss a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future." A brief, rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. And I really believe in my heart that we can make that concerted effort. And we can radically collaborate at a level that we cannot even yet begin to imagine. But it really has to start by figuring out how we connect with one another, how we build those deep connections. So I just want to start us out tonight by asking everyone just to shut your eyes for a minute. And I want you to think about the question, the beautiful Mr. Rogers question, of who has loved you into being? So who has loved you into being? Okay, I want you to come back into the room, and I want you to hold those people in your heart, because we're going to come back to them in a minute. And I think as human beings, we mistakenly often think that we make ourselves, when it's really the people that we surround ourselves with who help us make us who we are in this world. And after 15 years of research with partnerships and collaborations, I also really believe that it's those deep connections that are at the center of most great human achievements. And over the last 15 years, we've also become obsessed with things like, how did we as human beings close the ozone hole? And I wanted to start by talking about that, because when we did this research, it was a great political success, it was a great policy success, it was a great science success, but as we peeled back and dug in, what we found is this beautiful human story. These beautiful, deep connections and friendships at the center of probably the greatest human achievement. And it all started with these two brilliant scientists in a lab in California, Sherwood Rowland and Mario Molina. And Sherry, as he was called, Sherry and Mario discovered that CFCs were destroying the ozone layer. And at the time, they were in everything. They were in hairspray, they were in refrigerators, they were in deodorants. And I'll never forget Joan, Sherry's wife, the day that he came home from the discovery, she said, "How's work?" And he said, "Work's great, but it may just be the end of the world." And Sherry and Mario felt so passionate that they had to alert the world to this impending doom that they quickly published an article in Nature, and they thought the entire world would mobilize and solve the problem. But the opposite happened. So the $8 billion CFC industry started to attack them and call them Russian spies. Their fellow scientists started to undermine them. Slowly, their speaking engagements were pulled out from under them, and doctoral students stopped going to their classes. And this didn't just last for a day or a week or a month. This lasted for a decade. And I was so lucky to talk to Mario before he passed in 2020. And I asked him, how on earth did you weather this attack on your career, on your life, on your being? And he looked at me and he said one word. He said, friendship. He said, Sherry and I were so close, even though we were so different. And we were never, ever going to stop until the world listened to us. And they didn't stop. And 10 years later, three other scientists who were friends in the UK proved that there was a hole in the ozone layer close to the South Pole. And then that mobilized the whole world, and we led into the Montreal Protocol. Again, one of the greatest achievements of our lifetime. But the odd thing is, this isn't taught in our schools. It's not taught in our companies. We don't use it as an example. And I feel like one of the reasons why is because it doesn't fall into that superhero myth that we've created. It's not one person who saved the day. It's this extraordinary collective of friends. And this happens again and again. If you take, for example, ending apartheid, we all think of Mandela immediately, who was an extraordinary leader. But one moment that shifted my perspective forever was right after he died. We were fortunate to be in South Africa to celebrate his extraordinary life. And we were crammed in. There was about 200 of us crammed into this tiny white tent. And it was literally pouring rain, so our feet were soaking, rain was pouring on our head. But there was this unbelievable electric current of joy in this tent. And one after the other, these anti-apartheid heroes stood up on that stage and paid great tribute to this man. And Archbishop Tutu was the last one to get up on the stage. He had his flowing purple robes on, soaking wet. And it was beautiful, the words that they said on the stage. But what was more fascinating to me was what happened after they got off the stage. Because they just had this deep love and connection with one another. And I remember turning to the woman next to me on my right-hand side, who was one of the family members from one of these anti-apartheid heroes. And I said, how on earth did they weather apartheid, the horrors of apartheid, and still remain deeply connected and extraordinary friends? And she said two things to me. She said, one is they had an extraordinary purpose that they were living for. And the second thing she said is any one of them could have been Mandela. But instead what they did is they played the role that they knew would make the biggest difference to the collective. And so you had people like Walter Sisulu, who was the planner, and amazing female leaders on International Women's Day that don't get celebrated, like Albertina, who was the one that mobilized the women's movement in South Africa. You also had people like Leah Tutu, who again was a force in the communities. You had Helen Sussman, who started a new political party, the Progressive Party, and for 13 years she sat in Parliament trying to end apartheid. And Mandela's role in all of this was to bring to life this intoxicating purpose that they had. And we went back, and at the Rivonia trials, before he was sentenced to prison on Robben Island, he gave a 3-hour speech, and we found the audio at the very end of that speech.
During my lifetime, I have dedicated my life to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination. And I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an idea for which I am prepared to die.
So that intoxicating purpose that Mandela articulated so beautifully mobilized the entire world to end apartheid. And you know, years later, after that, about a decade ago maybe, I ran into one of my heroes, George Bezos, who was one of the Rivonia trial lawyers, and I nervously went up to him and said, thank you for all you did to end apartheid. And he looked at me and he said, no one does it alone. And he looked at me again and he said, no one does it alone. But yet as human beings, from the time we are born almost, we are pushed towards this sense of having to win, having to be the top one, whether we're in grade school, high school, university, or in companies. We're pushed towards this sense of hyper-individualism. And for me, those curtains of hyper-individualism were pulled back when I had the great opportunity to help bring together an extraordinary group of leaders called the Elders that Mandela and Graça Machel founded. And I was watching these people trying to figure out how they became who they were in the world and how they had such extraordinary outsized legacies of impact in the world. And what became really clear is that they were who they were because of the relationships they surrounded themselves with, the people that they build those deep connections with. Whether it was friends, whether it was romantic partners, whether it was each other, whether it was family members. And so I became obsessed with two questions. One is, how do you build the deep connections in your life that make you the best possible version of yourself and allow you to make the most impact you can to other people's lives? And the second question is how you take those deep connections and build them into larger collaborations that can help build movements to drive large-scale change in the world. And so I went in search of the source of this wisdom. And so I went out and interviewed 60 partnerships and collaborations that had two things in common. One was longevity, and the second is they had used their partnership to make a bigger difference in the world. And what was really beautiful as I started to interview these partnerships around the world is that I started to see these extraordinary patterns, and they were common again. It didn't matter if it was business, romantic, family members, friends. Saw these incredible 6 degrees and call them the 6 degrees of connection that were similar across all on how these people built these deep connections. And I just want to say a moment of thanks to Simon Sinek from Optimism Press and to Adrian from Penguin Random House, who are both sitting over there, because they had belief in this idea. And that's why the book is in the world today. And also, again, thanks to Ian, Joe McPike, so many others who also created education curriculum, the website. We have hundreds of videos. So all this rich content around this. And we're obviously not going to go into all these right now. But what I thought I'd love to do is just for a minute bring some of these extraordinary partnerships into the room.
The one will make up what is lacking in the other. And in these parts, we speak of it as Ubuntu. A person is a person through other persons.
A lot of people believe that partnership is 1 and 1 equal 2. It's wrong. 1 and 1 equal 2, you have no added value.
1 + 1 = 3 is when the relationship is perfect.
The goal is not to be better than the other and make a competition. The goal is to be better than what we were before.
It's been a lot more fun doing it with somebody else. Everything in life is a lot more fun if you share it.
During the growth of Ben & Jerry's, I would walk around the company and say, oh, this is wrong, that sucks, that's fucked up, don't do that. And he'd be walking behind me saying, well, what Ben really meant to say was, you know, do this and that. And it was, you know, he could say it in a way that people could hear it.
Choose somebody that you've already worked with before.
If you ask me what I value about Robbie, it would be first and foremost our friendship. We're almost always aligned on major strategic things, big items for the company, because more or less we have this same goal.
You need somebody, you know, poking the fire and saying, you know, this isn't as good as it could be.
That kind of tough love advice is pretty welcome when it happens.
Give each other plenty of space, even you're going to be different people.
And he always listened to me. He didn't always react the way I wanted him to, but he always listened to me.
We complement each other rather than being echoes of each other. It does require compromise and hard work. It has to be grounded.
You mean hard work?
We are friends before we're partners.
A lot of it's just about trust. You know, I think Ben and I just completely trusted each other.
You've always pushed me to do things that I thought maybe I couldn't do. Often I'll be in a situation, I'll think, what would Sev do? And then it's like, okay, I can do this.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
I am a movement by myself, but I'm a force when we're together.
It feels right, and it feels like it's what we were always meant to do.
I think we have a shared passion for improving the world around us.
Wonderful. You can see how much fun it was doing these interviews. I have never laughed as hard with Ben & Jerry for almost 2 hours straight, just laughing. And then with Richard and Peter throwing water, we're thinking about, okay, Peter's shirt's now soaking wet. That's not going to be great in the video. So just coming back to where we started, you know, Warren Buffett was asked a question once about what is the success and meaning in life. And he posed a question back. And the question he posed back is, do the people you love you back? Do the people you love you back? And I just want to leave you with 2 things that I would love you to do tonight. One is, think about, as you hear from these amazing partnerships that I'm going to turn over to in a minute, think about before you leave tonight, who and what will you love into being when you leave here tonight? And the second thing I want you to do is I want you to take something very old-fashioned. I want you to take a pen, and you're going to get a postcard on the way out that's already stamped. And I want you to write a postcard to one of those people you held in your heart who helped love you into being in this world, and sent that message of gratitude to them. Because we all spend so much time staying fit, planning our lives, but we spend very little time in moments of gratitude for the people who make us who we are in this world. And you know, I was in a session the other day, this big climate meeting, and this young woman stood up and she talked about that quote where it's something like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And then she went on to say, we have to go alone because we need to go fast in climate change right now. And I think that quote's deeply wrong, because I really believe, after spending 15 years sitting at the feet of some of these great collaborations and partnerships, that the only way we're going to go fast and go far is together. And that's really why we're here tonight. And now I have the great privilege of introducing an extraordinary woman who, she and her husband, Pat and Scott, were 2 of the partnerships that feature in the book. And I don't think there's anyone better in the world to invite into this room on International Women's Day than Pat Mitchell. She was the first CEO of PBS. She was the president of CNN Productions. She started many things, like with Chris around TED Women. She's the curator of TED Women. She was also one of the founding members of V-Day. And the list goes on and on. Chair of Sundance. She's on Jacqueline's board. But I think, for me, the most beautiful thing about Pat is 2 things. One is her extraordinary loving partnership with Scott, which was just a gift to interview them. And the second thing is how many people she lifts up in this world, especially women. And I'm so thankful to Pat for lifting me up in this world in so many different ways. So Pat, over to you.
Oh, my goodness, Jane. Scott and I are so incredibly honored to be a part of this book, and congratulations on this launch. We would so much want to be with you tonight, but you know what they say about partnerships? There'll always be those good and bad times and sickness and health. Well, Scott's not sick, but he did take a bad slide on a little black ice here at Sundance, and he fell forward on his forehead and his knee, but he wanted to come and sit for just a moment to say how much it meant to us to be a part of Plus Wonder.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Jacqueline. I just wanted to barge in to say congratulations to you, Gene. Everything I've seen about the book so far looks really wonderful, and I really enjoyed your introduction. And forgive me, but I'm just going to, since you introduced Pat so well, I'm going to hobble off now and turn you over to Chris and Jackie.
Right. Scott said earlier he knew he married a dangerous woman, but he wanted to assure everybody I didn't push him on that ice. He slipped. There are so many things in my head today on International Women's Day, and I really am grateful, Jean, for the solidarity that you expressed with the women and the children and the families in the world who are under such great stress and threats tonight. And I was also thinking about a partnership that really did prove to be a plus wonder for the world, a partnership that began in upstate New York. Two very diverse women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, came together with a shared vision and a shared purpose to end slavery and gain their right to vote. And as we know, that right to vote is threatened in many places today, and slavery still exists. But it was the purpose of the partnership that kept them together and that quite literally changed our world. And tonight I had the privilege of having a conversation with two people who also came together around a shared vision for the world, and through their partnership, a marriage of equals, to be sure. They have found ways to lead very separate, whole lives, each leading a transformational movement, but then in partnership to model how two people united in marriage and by purpose are more than 1 + 1, as we hear so often. They are, in Jean's words, a plus wonder for the world. Hi, Jacqueline. Hi, Chris Anderson. So great to see you both.
Hi, Pat. I wish you were here with us tonight.
I do too. I am missing that. Just in case there's anyone who doesn't know the work that the two of you do, Jacqueline founded Acumen, changing the way that the world looks at poverty and solves for the inequities that the poor face everywhere. And of course, Chris, who founded and who has the mission of TED, which is to spread the ideas that inspire people to learn, listen, and engage with something bigger than ourselves. And when I think about the two of you and your partnership, I think about that, how you model and answer the fear that's shared by many people. Can we come into a marriage whole people doing important work, which you were already doing when the two of you met? So how has your meeting and forming a life partnership changed that work?
Why don't you go first?
No, I think you should. Well, I actually met Jacqueline at TED. She spoke at the first TED I ran when I took over TED, and I have to say I was impressed. It was a fine talk, and I couldn't get to you out of my head for some reason. Wasn't just the physical attraction, it was what you stood for, which I honestly didn't know that someone could be both, active and dynamic on world issues, but also just stand for, I don't know, it almost sounds corny to say it, but I saw you as someone who really stood for goodness. Like you were ready to fight for it. And I was a missionary kid, and I'd let go of religion, but this part had stuck, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is an astonishing person. So I spent several years trying to figure out how to go on a date with you. In the end, I had to move bloody Ted to bloody New York City to have a chance at doing it. You know, so it was a long story, and eventually we got together, and you know, it's definitely the most fortunate, lucky. Like I still, when times are bad, if I wake up in the night and worried, like I will definitely take a moment to say, but on the other hand, you are married to the world's most amazing woman, so it can't be that bad. And so it's brought me a lot of gratitude and a lot of joy and a lot of inspiration, and occasionally stress, but it's worth it.
I'll come back to the stress in a moment. But Jacqueline, I'm remembering you because I knew you before Chris briefly, and you were fiercely independent. And I remember conversations about worrying about, would you lose that independence, that wholeness, that dedication and commitment to your work if you entered into this kind of partnership? So what did you mean by that, and how have you dealt with that fear?
This is quite the conversation, Pat, particularly after G had started. And Jean, just, where are you? Just enormous, enormous congratulations to you. This is extraordinary, what you have pulled off. And so I thought we were going to be talking about world peace, like Mandela, not this. Yeah, you know, I grew up of a generation and in a big immigrant family where so many of the women I knew walked down the aisle as Jane Smith and walked back down the aisle as Mrs. Stan Jones. And I remember even as an 11-year-old turning to my mother and saying, like, they just disappeared her. And there was a big part of me that feared that once I married, I would somehow get smaller, that I couldn't really imagine marrying and really marrying someone who understood that I was going to be committed for my whole life to something much bigger than myself, and that maybe that would even be bigger than this marriage. And so I was terrified, and which is why I was very old when I finally got married. And then Chris Anderson came into as this extraordinary force of nature that wasn't going to take no for an answer. And one of the pivotal points in my life was when I was trying to explain to him why this was never going to work. And I explained that he was so not my type, that, you know, I only dated, and I gave him this whole humiliating line of qualities, or more superficial characteristics, quite frankly. And without missing a beat, Chris kind of cocked his head to the side and he said, you know, Jacqueline, I find that very good news. Because let's face it, you're 42, and I don't think your type has worked very well for you.
Boy, what a good line, Chris Anderson.
And you know, it was extraordinary because he had a point. He had a really great point that I had played it safe my whole life till then because I was afraid. And then when I married someone who himself had committed his whole life to something so much bigger than himself, 1 + 1 really did equal, I don't know, maybe 17. And I was allowed to run freer than I'd ever run. And I learned that it's only when you make a commitment that you really can find that freedom.
At your commitment ceremony, didn't Chris add a vow that assured you, Jacqueline, a bit that this was your type, this was the right man to form a life partnership with?
Well, I sort of had to partner with my mother. I mean, it was quite. There were times, Pat, that you know, all the way up till the time we got married, and certainly for the last 20 years, Chris assured me that what he loved was the commitment. And then when we were making our vows, which we had written in front of all the people that we loved, Chris added an extra one. And he said, there's one more that I have just for you. And I vow, Jacqueline, that I will never hold you back. And I think that was a moment where you make a public commitment that has really stayed true. And it's in some of the stressful times, the difficult times, where Chris reminds himself of that. I remember a phone call that I made to him after I'd been in the middle of a quite frightening shootout in Pakistan, where I was in the middle of 25 men on either side shooting, and I was in the crossfire with 2 young people. And we got home, everybody was safe, or at least we were safe, and I called Chris to talk about it, and I remember him saying, every bone in my body wants you to come home, and yet I promised I would never hold you back, so you stay with those young people, and you be there, and you do that work. And that for me was also this idea that I do have home, and now it's a refuge, and that love is with me, and that was a really big moment.
Yeah, that does deserve applause, and that's why when people think of you both, they think of you as a partnership that really is bigger than the two of you, not just because of the movements and organizations that you lead, but because of the way you have built a community. And you talk a lot about that in Jean's book, about how important community, you actually say it's foundational to the partnership. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you have built a community around you?
I mean, there's, there are 2 separate communities initially, if you like, the TED community, Acumen community, but they share a lot of values in common, and our circle of friends who bridge both communities, certainly, they cheer both communities on. But I just think, I mean, at the time, I think when we got married and we talked about how much the community mattered, it was just that, I mean, marriage is hard. Even when you're married to the most amazing person in the world, it's still hard. But knowing that there is a group of 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 people who are as committed to the relationship as you are. I mean, it has to be, you have to work things out. And I mean, one of the skills that you're amazing at, and that I think has really helped, and it's nothing to do with being a sort of visionary poverty solver and so forth. It's about being really self-aware and articulate, is talking, when things are hard, having the sort of the error-correcting ability to have a conversation and say, what is actually going on here? And you are the least defensive person I've met in terms of saying, like, if there's something, like, you will offer something that is on your side way too early often, it's usually on my side, but you will offer something on your side, and it completely unlocks a situation, and it allows us to navigate through to a sort of solution. But yeah, having our friends and just feeling like we're part of this bigger, there's so much strength from that.
Yeah, I would just add, Pat, that my grandmother always used to say, show me who your friends are, show me who you walk with, and I'll tell you who you are. And I think that is such profound wisdom, and we have been pretty intentional and lucky at the same time to build a community of friends who are all committed to things bigger than themselves, changing the world. Pat Mitchell, you are one of the most important people in my life. And so the conversations are never trite. The conversations are about what you stand for, to where Jean started, why you're hurting. And I think it makes you know that you're not walking alone. And I particularly come from a big tribe. There are 7 siblings and 23 nieces and nephews, all in New York City, and Chris has to deal with that, which comes at a cost, that you have to show up sometimes when you don't feel like showing up. But the secret people don't talk about, and I think it's to Jean's point of how we've gotten so individualistic, It's that when you need them, they all show up. And I think that's what's really enriched our lives. And thank you for dealing with my big family.
We do sometimes have trite conversations.
We have ridiculous conversations.
But we're not having one tonight because everyone's listening to learn.
We could.
We're learning about partnerships, and that's why I think Jane's book is going to have such great meaning, because the purpose was that, and you have referenced this already. And by the way, I love being a part of the community of Chris Anderson and Jacqueline Novogratz. So thank you for that invitation and the purpose and vision we share. But you referenced that there is friction when you live the kind of full and highly engaged lives. There are those moments of stress, and Chris, you already gave Jacqueline credit for one of the ways she handles that, which is such a great instruction. Are there other ways? Do you have rituals or code words, or do you have a way to say time out? I mean, how do you handle those times of friction or stress?
Chris uses humor. I'm not funny. I'm really intense, and I can be ice. But Chris uses humor, and so picking a trite thing would be, Chris just doesn't close the cabinet doors, and so I'd be like, could you just try to close the cabinet doors? Instead of getting defensive, he would say, here's the thing, Jacqueline. 90% of the time, I close the cabinet doors, and you only see the 10%. And so if you would just flip your whole approach, you would be so excited that most of the times they were closed. And so he would really have a point. And then maybe a half hour later or 2 hours later, where I'd completely forgotten, I'd hear these bang, bang. I'm closing the cabinet doors. And so he defangs in a way that I don't, which I think humor is really important. Sometimes we fight about big issues. How do we get out of those?
I don't know. I mean, the thing we mostly fight about is we both are used to controlling our worlds. And when stuff we do overlaps, that those sort of two desires to control can be challenging. I mean, honestly, the best actual therapy we do is just go on a walk. What if you walk, nature, beautiful, you remember the other things, and just the process. Even if you have a conversation about nothing much initially, we usually figure a way to sort stuff out.
Yeah.
That's really good advice, too. And in today's world, with all of the many stresses that are coming at us from outside, to also be leading the movements that you're both leading, which, have their own huge significance in the world. Is there competition, or are you always open to what's good for you is good for both of us? How do those conversations go?
I think there is sometimes a feeling of competition, and ironically, it's the person who might be feeling that they're not succeeding as much at any given moment, that the other, that you're so weary, and I'll just speak for myself, that there are times when you feel like you're not doing anything well, and what Chris is doing is like touching something and magic happens. And so it's less competition with the person, but it reflects back that you're just as bad as you thought you were. And so what's easy to do in those times, and I've done it, is then to be more cold, to not celebrate Chris as much. And what I've started to learn how to do, and I'm getting old, I better learn how to do it, is to reflect back the vulnerability instead and say, I'm really struggling with this right now, and that changes everything. But the feelings are there, Pat. There are times.
Yeah.
We've also had a lot of moments where we've just had a lot of joy in celebrating the other person. It's kind of, I certainly get huge joy in seeing you shine.
Totally, but she was asking about the tension.
I know. Well, speaking of which, I should, you mentioned you have this great relationship with Pat. I think before we get off stage, you two should just say a word about that that partnership? How would you? What's just? Hey, it's all in the plan, Pat.
Are you turning the tables on me, Chris Anderson?
Someone whispered that I
These
should.
are two media
so,
people.
You know. Jacqueline,
Well, I think our friendship, just speaking from my perspective, has always been based on a shared purpose. I mean, I so deeply admire Jacqueline's passion and commitment and the way she approaches everything. I just from the moment I first met her, I felt that is someone I want to be in her life. And being in her life is just full of knowledge gain. You're always learning something and always feel like you're doing something important. There are no insignificant moments in our friendship, and yet there are many frivolous, fun, silly moments. But there are no insignificant moments. Everything Jacqueline does is very meaningful to me.
I think we're supposed to wrap.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to say something about Pat Mitchell, whether we're supposed to wrap or not, because
Say it.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. But what I would say is that I sort of see our whole generation as a circle, and you go through life with a circle of friends and family, the people that are part of your life, and you walk through and you say goodbye to people in the circle and you welcome people into the circle. And there's an incredible gift of having someone in your circle, in your closest circle, that's a little bit further down the path than you are. And Pat is a little bit older than I am, not much, but enough so that I can see who I want to be and how I want to be. And to have a deep friendship and a woman role model who is beautiful and joyful and celebrating other people and unafraid to travel all over the world and always making other people bigger is the best kind of role model a person could have in their life, because it's right there. It's in your intimate place. And
Woo. Thank you, Jacqueline.
that's why I love you, Pat Mitchell. And you are my...
Me too. And I'm seeing Sean and Jean, and probably we must move on, and it's so hard to leave this conversation. But let me just say it the way somebody already said this tonight, but it is something that really resonates with me. Each of you is a movement, but together you really are a force for good in the world. Thank you for that. And thank you, Jean, for profiling these two extraordinary people and all of the other partnerships that are really plus wonders for the world. Back to you, Jean.
Am I introducing you, or are you just coming on? Well, these two really need no introduction. Sarah Kay and Phil Kay are two extraordinary poets, artists, human beings, who are also co-founders of an incredible organization called Project Voice that has worked with 150,000 young people in 30 countries all around the world. They are life forces. You will see it. And before we have our conversation, they are going to share one of their poems.
Oh, thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, everyone. So my name is Sarah.
And my name is Phil.
And we are both poets. And you maybe noticed from our slide that we have the same last name. And what that means is that oftentimes when people first meet us, they want to know if we are brother and sister, right. Which is a fair question, but the answer is no. And then sometimes they want to know if we're married, right. Which is also a fair question. Answer is also no. And then there's usually a series of questions that follow along the lines of like, are you dating? Right. Have you dated?
Classic.
Will you date?
Sure.
Are you secretly dating?
Spicy.
And all of those are fair questions, and all of those the answer is still No.
No.
The true story is that I grew up here in New York City and Phil grew up in California on the opposite side of the country. And so neither one of us knew that the other person existed, really, for most of our lives. And then, by coincidence, we ended up going to the same college. And in the very first week of our freshman year of college, there was a talent show for the whole freshman class. Anybody could sign up. And in that talent show, there were 2 people signed up to perform spoken word poetry, which is a niche interest, shall we say. And so when we met, we said, no way, you like poetry, I like poetry, what a weird coincidence. And then we discovered we had the same last name, and we said, well, that's a weird coincidence. And pretty soon, all of these other weird coincidences started to unravel around us. And at this point, I would say that weird coincidences are really a bedrock of our partnership. But whenever we meet a new group of people, we always like to share this poem because we hope that it will offer you a small explanation, at least a beginning, of what is going on here. It started with a sweater.
I was looking fly. First day of college orientation as a freshman, and I'm the type of guy who's always trying to make a good impression.
He looked like a tool. And it's the first week of school, so I've got people to meet and things to try. I don't have time to waste on a guy hanging out backstage at a talent show.
It started with a freshman talent show. A chance to showcase what I know about spoken word and poetry, try to get some people to notice me.
It started with a technical difficulty.
Some sort of delay.
Somebody's iPod track wouldn't play.
So I'm stuck waiting backstage when I notice this girl.
And he walks over, stupid sweater and all. There was nowhere to run. Backstage was too small.
And I'm so nervous about going on stage that I decide to strike up a conversation.
Sorry, I completely got ahead of myself. I totally skipped introductions. My name is Sarah Kay.
My name is Phil Kay. I'm from California.
I was born and raised in NYC.
Let's see, a fun fact about me.
My mom is Japanese and my dad is Jewish. It's not a common combination, but I think it's kind of cute. People call me Japa-Jew.
Japanese.
Ashkenazi kamikaze.
And come December, Hanukkah and Christmas.
Plus, you should taste my mother's brisket. Jan Kawamura's matzo ball soup with noodles brings my father Jeffrey to his knees.
It took Mom Reiko and Dad Michael to raise this lanky me.
Well, I think that's it. My mom, my dad, and me. Oh, plus my little brother. He's 4 years younger than me.
My little sister is 4 years younger than me, but she keeps me on track. Her name is Sarah.
My brother's name is Philip.
Anyway,
where was I?
It started with a backstage interaction.
No, it started with a backwards first impression.
Okay, well, I'll tell you where it did not start. It did not start at our 5th grade summer camp.
That's true. It did not start at our summer camp called Junior Lifeguards, even though we were both there.
In our matching uniforms, red bathing suit, white t-shirt, visor, and
our counselor, Mr. Johnson, who probably figured that the shy girl in his morning class
and the skinny kid in his afternoon class
were cousins? He probably thought that we had carpooled over together.
In between family photo shoots and 4th of July barbecues.
But instead, we only coexisted.
Almost met, but always missed it.
Spinning round like 2 sides of a coin. Look, we've done the research, and we swear we're not related.
And we've never dated.
And we're never, ever going to.
Because what are the chances of finding someone with your last name?
Who's Japanese and Jewish with both siblings called the same?
What are the odds of finding someone
who can finish your sentences?
Who will let you cut in line?
Who knows not to just lend a hand or an ear when you need them to give you their spine?
Who is woman enough to be best man at your wedding?
Who will keep every secret, save every letter, tell you how you really look?
Who will remember every single one of your birthdays?
Without checking Facebook.
What are the odds of finding someone who knows your poetry by heart?
Who won't freak out if you're hanging out and you accidentally fart.
Yeah, and if you have a date and you need to look fresh, I will let you borrow my hair products.
And if you do not have a date and you need to look fresh, I will let you borrow my cousin.
I will always see you for the alley-oop.
I will always save you a seat.
I will always pick you to be my partner even though you are terrible at handball.
When the fire takes all you have, my home will be your home.
When you are old and can no longer remember my face, I will meet you for the first time again and again.
When they make fun of your accent, I will take you swimming, because we all sound the same underwater.
When Ellis Island tries to erase your past, I will call you by your real name.
When they call your number for the draft, I will enlist to fight beside you.
And I will march with you or sit quietly and listen. Because it didn't start with us. It started with Lennon and McCartney.
It started with Thelma and Louise.
It started with Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin.
Bert and Ernie.
Abbott and Costello.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Mario and Luigi.
Watson and Sherlock.
Pikachu and Charizard. And they could tell you what a miracle this is.
They could tell you how rare this is.
But they could tell you how rare friendship always is.
The chances are slim.
The cards are always stacked against you. The odds are always low.
But I have seen the best of you and the worst of you. And I choose both.
I want to share every single one of your sunshines and save some for later.
I will tuck them into my pockets so I can give them back to you when the rains fall hard.
Friend, I want to be the mirror that reminds you to love yourself.
I want to be the air in your lungs that reminds you to breathe easy.
When the walls come down.
When the thunder rumbles. When nobody else is home. Hold my hand.
And I promise
I won't let go.
That was extraordinary. And you two are
Thank you, Jack.
extraordinary as individuals and as a partnership. And that poem, it's going to take a minute even to get through. But you talk about all these ways that you are similar, all these ways that you are connected. And you've been partners now for more than 15 years. Talk about some ways you're not similar. And where that holding of the tension of the I know you and this is me makes this partnership so beautiful and also maybe hard.
Getting right to it.
A second poem. No, just kidding. We don't have that one. How are we different? Lots of ways. I mean, we have all of these funny, strange coincidences that, and that, honestly, that poem just scratches the surface. There's even like more that we could, it would be a 25-minute poem if we kept going. So there are all of these coincidences, and now we take, no, it's not that we take them for granted, but we take them as though, but of course, we've discovered these things. And so I think a lot of times we have talked about our partnership like discovering you have a sibling that you didn't know you had, and much in the way that I'm really fascinated by siblings, how you can have two people with possibly nearly identical DNA raised in the same house with the same parents, theoretically with the same rules and values and priorities, and have them end up so wildly different from each other, but also have a shared history and a shared understanding, so you can be like, I don't get anyone, no one gets me the way you do, and also I don't get you at all. And I think that that is a part of our siblinghood, is like, we have this like deep shared history, and I can anticipate what Phil is going to feel or think about a thing, and I can feel him anticipate what I am gonna feel or think about a thing, even if that's not what I would feel or think about a thing.
I love that. You haven't fully answered the question.
Oh, how are we different?
Sarah, I'm going to push you.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine.
How are you different? Or do you think you're not?
No, we are. I think Phil is more comfortable with people in the world, like a friendlier person. And I'm a little bit more introverted. And oftentimes he can feel my introversion and is very good at sort of like, yeah, taking up the mantle when needs be. That's how my first instinct on how we're different.
Yeah, and maybe related, you know, I think Sarah is really good at thinking through, something's coming up, whether it's a work thing or a personal thing, and like, here's all the things we need to think through. And I think I'm much more willing to jump to like, it's all going to be fine.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, there's a somewhat naive optimism that I think Sarah has saved me from sometimes, and is like, well, but here's this thing that we need to think through.
I'm the prepared cynic, and he's the improvisational optimist.
I love it.
And I think that's done us very well.
Yeah.
And I think over 15 years of friendship and partnership, some of that own voice has been developed in ourselves in nice ways. And I think we've both kind of balanced each other out over that time.
Where you've changed each other. I mean, just listening you in this time of so much loneliness, Sarah, you talk about a sibling that you understand and you don't understand. You've chosen a sibling. And that power, just watching you is so extraordinary. And yet in your poem, you talk about everyone looking at you and wondering, are you married? Are you dating? Will you ever date? This is a hypersexualized world in which we live. And it must have been at times stressful to your partnership, to the fact that you were building this beautiful organization, to have to navigate that on the outside. And what have been your superpowers to allow you to find this true, authentic voice in the midst of a world that can be pretty mean, judgmental, and decide who you are for you?
There's an elementary and middle school in San Francisco, middle school for all girls. And we were there. Now, we've gotten to work with them for several years, but we were there one year. I think that was the first year we were there. And we did our performance, we did this poem, and I guess with the 8th graders that day in their English class, totally coincidentally, one of their vocabulary words had been platonic. And I guess all these 8th grade girls were just like, this makes no sense. I don't believe it. And so I think for us it's been fun in some ways. I mean, this sounds odd, but kind of to Sarah's siblinghood, it wasn't like, oh no, here's this hard thing and how do we navigate around it? It's truly like, oh, well, you're my sister. And so it hasn't felt like this roadblock that we've had to work around. If anything, I think the like naturalism of it has been easier for us, and without giving ourselves too much credit, I think a model for some folks of like, oh, it can be just this thing.
I think one of the reasons why we wanted to write that poem is because there's so many love poems about romance, and there's not that many love poems about friendship. And I think it would be a mistake to not honor our friendship and partnership and siblinghood as like a great love of our respective lives, And so to have all the poems go to romantic love isn't fair. And I think getting to write a poem like that, getting to share a poem like that, getting to be known by the people who know us for the celebration of a different kind of love is intentional and very joyful. I would agree that like it actually isn't hard for us. I think it's hard for the world, but that's a really juicy opportunity for us to kind of model what really is like a deep and profound and meaningful love that is not romantic.
I love that. And you can see the joy, and I want to get to joy as part of partnership because I think you two model it so beautifully, and I think Jean writes about it as well. But I'm also thinking about some of the people in this room who are writers, and the idea of writing so often is a singular experience. The fact that you are partners that also collaborate in your writing in poetry, which is the most stark of all the types of writing. How do you do it? And what is that? How do you even define partnership in that way?
A lot of espresso.
A lot of pacing. I do a lot of pacing.
Yeah. It's a little bit like if anyone's a musician, if you've ever had like a jam sesh with another musician, right? You come in and you sort of, I don't know your instrument, but I know my instrument, and we can tune to the same chords, and we can be like, all right, we're going to sort of see what happens. I'm going to pluck out something, and then you're going to see what works on top of it, and then, oh, do that again, but do it double time, and I'm gonna drop low there. Like you start to see what sounds right. Yeah, you riff, and I think it's a little bit like that. We come in knowing that we both have thoughts, ideas, feelings around one, core song that we're going to find. And we offer what we've got, and we've built such a foundation of trust and joy and safety for that like when we're in play mode, you just throw it all out there, and there's no, we all know that we both know that we're serving the God of the best poem in that moment, and as a result of that, it isn't. If someone's line flops, it's like, great, on to the next, and it's nice to have someone else's brain, because a lot of times when I'm writing alone, I'll write a line and I'll be like, that's a bad line. This is a bad poem. I'm a bad writer. I'm a bad person. Everything is bad. And like the descent is very fast. And it's nice to have another person go, that's a bad line, next. And not get caught on the other half of it, or to say like, oh, that's an amazing line, and you go, oh, that's an amazing line? Like, oh, great. And so I think sometimes having that other person is a real buoy in the writing.
And there isn't, again, to talk about like non-romantic or sexual intimacy, like there is an absolute intimacy to be like, here's all these ideas, what do you think of them? In the moment. And we've both written collaborative poems with other people, and I know oftentimes there's other less intimate ways. I'm going to write my stuff in a Google Doc, then you work on it, and then we'll come together and discuss, or kind of have all our things prepared and then kind of timidly share them. But I think part of the joy of writing with Sarah, it is a much more kind of raw, earlier in the process, vulnerable process of just like, here's all these ideas, and if they suck, that's okay, but I want to know what you think about them.
And both metaphorically and in reality, finishing each other's sentences.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk about joy, because you truly do. You exude light, the two of you, but you also exude joy. What is the role of joy, not just in your art, but in your partnership? Particularly because these two they're not just artists and poets, which would be enough. They also run Project Voice, which is a powerhouse of an organization bringing these skills to, as I said, 150,000 people already around the world, young people. And they have a business. You're sort of a mini conglomerate of left brain, right brain, having to be in the world, which is super complex. Where does joy fit in all of this?
I think all around, to me, it's the glue that holds it all together. We've spent a lot of boring time in rental cars, in Holiday Inns around the country, in different countries. And to me, it's simple stuff. I mean, to have that conversation you just had. Sometimes it's trite stuff. Sometimes it's we travel very long distances for good meals. Sometimes it's Sarah's much more dialed into the internet, particularly the older I get. Sometimes it's just Sarah like, here's what's happening on the internet. And I kind of like download and like, yes, okay. And to me, that's kind of the magic sauce of it all. And what gets us through.
I have two thoughts on joy. One is like, you don't get into poetry for the money.
But a lot of poets don't seem to get in it for the joy.
I think that's true. And I would be remiss to say that there's not, like poetry is present for so much, or can be present for so much beyond joy. It can be present for community and for healing and for activism and for, it isn't only joy. I do think that one element for us specifically is we were both young people when we fell in love with poetry, and we both had the experience of watching someone share a poem that like lit up our whole being and made us go like, that's possible. And experiencing that joy then made both of us independently and then together say, how can we recreate this moment for other young people? And so getting to watch other young people have that moment of joy, or if not joy, then a moment of possibility, is joyful for us, right? Like we get to watch someone fall in love with an art form, and we get to fall in love again and again for the first time through that. And I think that all my New York cynicism is present and goes straight out the window when I like watch a young person find what they want to say in the way that they want to say it to the audience they want in the way that is authentic to them. And like the joy I feel is the fuel in the tank to get us through all the rest of it.
I mean, we have to wrap way too early because I want to talk forever. But the one thing I do want to say that is, it's striking me as even more extraordinary about the two of you, is that, Sarah, Chris and I just had dinner with a number of poets who were older than you, but lamenting the fact that so many poets die young because can be such a joyless, difficult, solitary life. And you two are such an embodiment of partnership, joy, and seeing love and joy in other people that there's almost a metaphor for partnership. Jean, you got the right people here. For what giving and generosity and curiosity can make in the world and can make in the two of you. And we're just so lucky to have you in this world. You two are a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and now it is my job to introduce our next guest, a very important gentleman who is a self-professed unshakable optimist, who's the author of 5 books, including Start With Why, who hosts a podcast, who is also responsible for the press that allows us to have this beautiful book tonight. Please welcome Simon Sinek.
So good to see you. How are you? I think, Jean, you're joining me. Yeah. Okay.
No, I may just leave you up there.
Otherwise, I'll have to stand here awkwardly. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I'm so glad that you birthed this book.
Now.
I know.
He's been asking me questions all week long. So, Simon, why did you get excited about this book?
There's a few reasons. So, this imprint is came about because of a partnership. It's my partnership with Adrian Zackheim, who works at Penguin Books. He's over there.
Adrian, woohoo!
And Adrian is, I think, insane enough to take risks that I think a lot of other people aren't willing to take. And he trusts me in a way that I think few other people that I've worked with over the years trust me. Most imprints in publishing are very vertical. You know, this is a business imprint, this is a cookbook imprint, you know, this is health. And I wanted to do something that was more idealistic, to have an imprint that was driven by a vision rather than a subject matter. And the vision is simple, to build a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do. And I wanted to find the people and the ideas that I believed offered pieces of that jigsaw puzzle that would contribute in any way, shape, or form to bring us a little closer towards that vision. And then I met you. There are very few people in the world who have the opportunity to bear witness and to meet some of who we consider some of the most remarkable people in the world, which you have done for a long time. And more important, that you made this discovery that all these remarkable people that we revere, write books about, and make movies about, that they have a secret, that it's not them, that there are these partnerships. And that you started to discover these patterns in these partnerships that were not unique to any one of those partnerships, but were replicable. And your ability to identify those patterns means that all of us can operate at a higher level and make greater impact if we learn how to partner. And my favorite thing about the book, and we've talked about this, which is it's not a noun, it's a verb, it's active. It's not partnerships. It's not a story about partnerships. It's a story about how to partner, and that it's not a one and done thing, but it's a constant pursuit. And I think Chris said it best, which is it's a commitment to the commitment. And partnering is a commitment to the partnership. So as soon as I realized what you discovered, I thought, my goodness, we have to publish this book.
and Simon and Adrian won't tell you this, but I came in with all these boards. I was so excited about the patterns, and I must look like a crazy woman coming in with all these boards, and they still had the courage to take the risk on this book. So I'm very, very thankful.
I remember the boards.
You remember the boards. I was so excited about the 6 patterns. It's all I could talk about. Yeah. And so thank you to both of you for taking that risk. And you know, I was with this amazing woman last week, a woman named Stephanie Broby, who quit her job as a wealth advisor and decided she wanted to change the wealth advisory industry. And so I'm sitting there having this conversation with her, just talking about her journey. And I asked her, how did you decide to do this? What was the impetus? This is a massively courageous thing. And she said to me, well, I read this book, Start With Why, and it changed my whole life. And you know, Simon, I think you don't probably realize, we called Simon right away so that he could hear that from her. But I don't think you realize how many people's lives you've changed through the work that you've done. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about your thoughts on that beautiful and profound intersection between purpose and partnership.
So when I was very young in my career, and I had accomplished, you know, one thing. Well, actually, I think it goes back before that. Sort of when I had I'm an idealist, and I'm naive. You know, I'm naive enough to believe that the world that I imagine can become real. And when I would talk about this vision that didn't exist, people would laugh and call me an idealist, and call me silly, and call me naive, and all these things, which I took as a badge of honor. And then when one thing happened that made it feel a little closer, it was like the tiny little tip of an iceberg. They could see what was above the ocean, and I could imagine what was below the ocean. And so when somebody say, oh, nice job, I'd always say, tip of the iceberg. And then as the movement grew and as my career progressed with it, people would say, wow, look at that. And I would always say, tip of the iceberg. And even now, you know, intellectually I understand these things. You know, people write me beautiful letters, and I get to hear these stories. And even now, intellectually I understand it, but I don't get it, if I'm honest. And because when I hear them, what goes through my own head to myself is tip of the iceberg. I just have a lot more work to do. And so I learned a long time ago that the value of partnership. I learned that I am useless without the people around me. And I'm blessed that I have had people in my life who I would consider partners that have helped along the way, and the one person who's been steadfast throughout all of it is my sister. We grew up moving around the world, and so we lived on 4 continents by the time I was 10, and so friends kept changing, schools kept changing, grandparents were people we saw once or twice a year. That was normal to us, and so the only constant we had was each other. We're very, very different, our personalities, and we're the best of friends. We work together now as well, and she gets me, I think, better than anybody I've ever met, which I think a lot of brothers and sisters, not all brothers and sisters can say that. She gets me better than I get her, that's for sure. And I definitely wouldn't have the courage or the strength to do anything that I do without her.
I actually just have to take a moment and thank my sister, who's right there, who has just been a force in my life for my whole life.
I want to ask you a question.
Okay, then I can ask you another question.
I'm more comfortable in the asking side. It's a big deal to write a book, and it's hard. And I think you and I had this conversation right at the beginning, which is if it's easy to write, it's a bad book. Many people have come up to me and said, oh, I'm writing a book. It's actually a pretty easy process. And what goes through my mind is, that's a bad book. It hurts. And there's so few really good books because it is really difficult. So you've done it. Now what? Like, it's out in the world. It's birthed. Like, it lives its own life. What do you want it to go and accomplish? What do you want it to go do? You know, what dream do you have for this thing you've put into the world?
Yeah, and thank you to you and Adrian for warning me about how difficult it was. I don't think I ever realized how difficult it actually was going to be, but I think I had the beautiful opportunity to be using the wisdom from these 60 partnerships. I mean, we saw some of them tonight, how extraordinary they are. So what a life journey. It transformed me as a human being, this whole process. And I remember you and Adrian saying to me right in the beginning, you have to make sure that you have partnerships that are complete opposites and that are across divides. And that was one of the things that was most beautiful through this whole process I've gone through. So I'm really thankful that you guys really, really pushed me to make sure that I got extremes. And you know what I would love, Simon, for this book to do in the world is really almost spark a relationship reset. I feel like as human beings, we've become so disconnected and so hyper-individualistic that I'd love this book to just play some type of role in helping us reconnect. And that's why there's really practical wisdom in it from all of these partnerships, because I want people to understand how to do this. And, you know, I think when I started this journey, I saw people like President Mrs. Carter or, you know, Archbishop Tutu Lee, and I thought, oh, that's reserved for people that are great in the world. And what I learned through this process is that every single one of us can learn how to build these deep connections in our lives. And, you know, it's these great people at the center, like, you know, Stephen O. Anderson, who helped protect the ozone hole through his work. He's done it for 30 years. And just an extraordinary human being who built these connections in his life. So for me, if we can spark people to build these deep connections of purpose in their life, and if we can get it, the education system, if we can get one of these books into every teacher's hands, change the education system from being one that kind of pushes people to think that they have to win at all costs, whether that's in high school, university, grade school, and in businesses, the same thing. I think we go into companies. I mean, when I first started in a company, I was told, you know, the color of the logo is blue, and I was told I had to bleed blue, and I had to be the one that beat everyone else in the company. And we don't, you know, we can change that. And so I hope this book just sparks people to think about how they change their lens from thinking about what they can get through their relationships to what they can give the world through their relationships.
Oh, I love that. As you're talking about that, yes, agreed. I wish for that to be true, and I believe that that can be true. And as you're saying it, my mind immediately goes to the Great British Baking Show, or the Great British Bake Off, which is the greatest television that was ever made. Because it's a competition where there is a winner, and some of them admit that they want to win, but they help each other. And that those things are not mutually exclusive. Like ambition and drive are perfectly fine in a cooperative society. That it's not one or, it's one end. And I think that's your book will help make the whole world the Great British Baking Show.
Woohoo, that's a good. And I'm going to ask you one last question, Simon. You have this beautiful ability to really be present with people and really deeply listen. And you have this beautiful ability to then take that and come up with creative ideas. How important do you feel listening is, and how have you mastered that art?
Well, I think it goes without saying that it's massively important. We're all very good at talking, and we're not very good at listening. You know, there's a big difference between waiting for your turn to speak and listening. William Ury, who wrote Getting to Yes, the famous peace negotiator, he says that we have talk shows, but we need talk listens. He said we have peace talks, but what we need is peace listens. And this is the missing thing. And in every relationship, you know, whether it's professional or personal or romantic, you know, every relationship, the success depends on the ability to hear. And listening is not hearing the words that were spoken, but it's not only it's listening for meaning, but more importantly, that you have not listened until the other person feels heard. And I think people forget that listening actually requires at least two. And until someone else feels heard, you have not listened. And unfortunately, we don't teach that. It is a skill. It is a learnable, practicable skill. And we can teach it at school, but we don't. We can teach it at work, but we don't. And I think we need that education wherever possible to teach us that skill. What was the second part?
Oh, that was it.
I wasn't listening.
You were thinking about the Great British Bake Off.
Yeah, the Great British Bake Off. I mean, my thank you for that generous compliment. Very simply, I learned to listen young, thank goodness, not by desire but out of necessity. I have pretty bad case of ADD, ADHD. And so I can't read books. I'm not very good at reading books. It doesn't work. And it's ironic that I've written more books than I've read. It's true. And so so school was very difficult. And so I was going to fail if I didn't come up with a system that was different than the one that they told me I had to use, which was study. And so I had to learn to listen. And so I had to get good at going to class. Like in college, I couldn't skip class. And I had to pick classes that had good professors, because if they were bad at explaining, I couldn't learn. And so I had to learn to listen, and I had to learn to ask questions that would help me understand. So it was nothing more than a survival instinct, quite frankly. And I'm a great believer that the solutions we find to the struggles we have as children become our strengths as adults. Yeah. And so we all have something like that.
Yeah, well, we're lucky that you have that superpower, because it's incredible to watch and to be part of.
Thank you. I just want to give the final word to Jean. This book is remarkable. The partnerships that you found, that you share with us, are remarkable. The patterns that you discovered are remarkable and actionable. And we are here to celebrate you in this book. And we will all take it upon ourselves to help spread this message, because I think it's an important one. And so I think we should give one round of applause just to thank Jean for what she's put into the world. So thank you very much.
Congratulations.
And a massive thanks again to Adrian and Simon for taking that risk. And I now have the great privilege of introducing someone who's a very dear friend. And 12 years ago, we were stuck in a car in a snowstorm in New York for many, many hours. And after we got out of that car, I knew that I would always have a deep connection with Morley for the rest of my life. And she is not only a beautiful musician, she is also a magical storyteller. And throughout every single one of her songs, it brings meaning into the world. It connects us, it unites us, and it also challenges our thinking. But it puts us into a space of love. And I feel so blessed to know her in this world. So Morley, come on up.
Oh, congratulations, dear Jean. Jean is like a lighthouse in these times and all times, and at the same time, like a sunflower. Her seeds are nourishing, seeds of peace and loving kindness. I feel so blessed to be here tonight, and I'm accompanied by a wonderful, amazing bassist, Belden Bullock, who's going to be setting up right now. And this song is something I just wrote last night after reading some of the beginning of Plot's Wonder. So some of the words, a lot of the words are from the book. I think I got to the 28th page, and I really just weeping. It's just so inspiring and important to remember the power of looking in the same direction, and feeling like you know what you're for. So no matter what happens, you know what you're for. And when you have someone to do that with, and you find your people, and I feel that we found each other in this room, all of us, and anyone watching, you are our people. We are together in the one love, the one love. And the refrain of the song is, I am because you are. And beloved Archbishop Desmond Tutu talks about Ubuntu. In the book, he talks about, I am because you are. We are in every blade of grass and ancestor song. We are on the morning bird song and in the break of dawn. We are on the breath of dignity and life of every refugee worldwide. And we find over and over there is no turning away to turn to. What we find in each other is the spark of the wonder of the sacred, partnering on. What we find in each other is the sacred wonder of the blessed friendship blooming on long after we return to the stars. I am because you are. I am because you are. I am because you are, you are, you are. I am because you are. I am because you are. I am because you are, you are, you are. I will hold you and let you go to the places you need to go. Yes, I will hold you close and I will let you go to the places that you need to go. I'll never hold you back. 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 I am because you are. I am because you are. I am because you are, you are, you are. Made for loving, made of stars, made of water, made to know safety, made for loving. Freedom fighter, fighting for justice, protecting the water, protecting the water. I am because you are. I am because you are, you are, you are. Can we all say this? Yes. Yes. What we found in each other is the spark of the wonder of the sacred, partnering on. What we found in each other is the sacred wonder of the friendship blooming on long after we return to the stars, to the stars. I am because you are. I am because you are. I keep returning again and again and again to the center of us. I keep returning to the trust to build something bigger than us. Peace. Golden Bullet. Congratulations, Jean. Thank you, beloved community. You are loved.
Up, up, up. Woo, Orly! that she just wrote that. Okay, so that's all from the formal program. Thank you to the live stream. If you guys are still there, I know we're running a little late. So the only 3 things you need to do now is have fun together and meet each other, because there's amazing people in this room. Don't forget to take your postcard and write a letter to the person that was in your heart, that has loved you into being. And then there's a bunch of these quote cards out there from the different people in the book, as well as there's books out there if anyone wants to grab a book. So thank you guys so much for being here. It's been so amazing to see so many dear friends.